Being educated at Wellesley really meant that all the doors, as some of you already said, were open to me. I feel comfortable no matter where I go. And it was not just by intention that I became the so-called famous woman. Chance played, but I think the fact that I was prepared by education at Wellesley, on top of the old sort of family education I had. My grandmother used to say, tigers leave their skin when they die, human beings leave their names. And on top of that, Wellesley's motto, non ministrari, sed ministrare. I think they jibed together. I was not a Christian, still not, but I felt so comfortable at Wellesley, and I love attending, going to chapel services. And in my days, the mandatory courses were freshman English and biblical history. They served me so well. Both of those subjects grounded me in, understanding of Western culture. And but at that time, I was always so frustrated, and I had indigestion the whole year. I became Korean ambassador to Russia thanks to the education I got at Wellesley. The Soviets sent their first man-made satellite in my sophomore year, and Wellesley immediately offered a course on Russian history, intellectual history course, brilliantly taught by Mimi Berlin. And when I took that course, I realized that was not someone else's story, but Korea's own history, own story, how to modernize yourself, learning from others, but on the other hand, not losing your soul. So I got attracted to this. I decided to major in history. But I dared to do that because I had no sense of profession. I came here, and the main purpose I had in mind and my family had in mind was just the education. And as a woman, I did not have this sense of obligation to provide livelihood for anyone. Because otherwise, for a Korean to express an interest in Russia would be running enormous risk, because anti-communism after the Korean War was so virulent that if you are saying that you're interested in Russians, you would be suspected of having sympathy for communism. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought Russia was such an important country to face for Koreans, and somebody had to study Russia. So that's what made me study, and in a way, history has caught up with me, and I was named first Korean woman ambassador in 1996 because Korea had finally pulled up itself through economic advancement. There was a women's conference, second women's conference in Beijing in 1995, and Korea proudly sent a large delegation, but in the UN statistics, Korea rated something like 91st among 110 countries studied in terms of women's empowerment. So the president was so embarrassed, and he ordered that women be appointed in every field. So they were searching for someone to send out as a woman, yes, a woman ambassador. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, being especially sort of high-nosed, they just couldn't really think of anybody. And finally, they thought of me. But there again, my being a woman played a factor. I wanted to remain a scholar. Although I was sitting on various government committees, actually the year before, I had been offered the portfolio of Minister of Education. I turned it down. Actually, I was interested in education, but on the other hand, at that time already, Korea's educational administration was so corrupt and there were so many interest groups that I knew that I would be blown out of the position immediately, because I knew they knew what sort of reforms I would be pushing, and there were interest groups who did not want that. So I declined that post, and then being offered this ambassadorial duties. Then, of course, the ministry didn't want to give me a big post. At first, I said, if you gave me Russia, I would go. Otherwise, I didn't want it. But you know, you understand what the ministry's position is. So you have to do it. And then there was a pressure from fellow women's community. You can do a good job, and that will open up the profession to women. So I accepted sort of second rank ambassadorship after having declined sort of a very high ranking ministerial portfolio. And that's because I could do it, because my way of thinking was different, not power seeking, but something I knew I would do a good job. And I did, and I was promoted to the Russian post after Finland.